On the night of December 26, 1944, First Lieutenant Paul A. Smith climbed into the cockpit of his P-61 Black Widow at an airfield in Belgium, preparing for a patrol that would make him and his radar operator the first American night fighter aces of World War II. Smith flew with the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron, the most successful P-61 unit in the European theater. His aircraft sat dark against the runway, painted flat black from nose to tail. Somewhere in the darkness over the Battle of the Bulge, German aircraft were moving to support their offensive. The 422nd was about to prove that darkness no longer belonged to the enemy. The P-61 Black Widow was not built for daylight combat. It was built for hunting in darkness. Twin-engine, twin-boom configuration, crew of 3, maximum speed of 366 miles per hour. Heavy, complex, equipped with radar that could see what human eyes could not. In the vast darkness over Europe, where enemy aircraft could hide in millions of cubic miles of black sky, the Black Widow was the Army Air Force's solution to an impossible problem. Find the enemy before the enemy found you. Smith's crew consisted of 2 other men. Radar operator First Lieutenant Robert E. Tierney sat behind Smith in the aircraft's midsection, monitoring the SCR-720 radar display. A gunner operated the remote-controlled turret when equipped, though many P-61s in Europe had the turret removed to save weight and eliminate buffeting problems. The 420mm cannons mounted in the belly provided devastating firepower. Smith and Tierney had been flying together through the autumn of 1944, running patrol after patrol over France and Belgium, searching dark skies. By December, the Battle of the Bulge had created target-rich skies for night fighters. The 422nd Night Fighter Squadron had been in combat since July 1944. The unit arrived in England in March, initially based at RAF Charmy Down, before moving to RAF Scorton in May. Their first P-61s arrived at the end of May 1944, about 2 weeks before D-Day, when German V-1 flying bombs began striking England after the invasion. The squadron trained by intercepting the pilotless weapons. On July the 16th, 1944, pilot Hermann Ernst and radar operator Edward Kopsel scored the first P-61 kill of a V-1, beginning the squadron's combat record. By late July 1944, the squadron moved to France, initially at Maupertus Airfield. They began engaging German aircraft in August, shooting down Messerschmitt Bf-110 and Focke-Wulf FW-190. The squadron's mission evolved beyond defensive patrols to aggressive hunting deep into German-held territory. They flew interdiction missions, attacking ground targets and hunting enemy aircraft that operated under cover of darkness. The P-61 carried one advantage over every other night fighter. It could see in the dark. While RAF Mosquitoes often relied on ground controllers to guide them toward targets, the Black Widow carried its own radar. The SCR-720 system could detect aircraft at ranges up to 5 miles, displayed targets on a circular cathode ray tube, showed range, bearing, and relative altitude. When conditions were right, it gave American crews the ability to find and kill enemy aircraft without ground assistance. The radar operator sat behind the pilot, monitoring the scope, calling out intercept vectors. The system worked brilliantly when maintained properly, but it had limitations. Heavy rain created false returns that cluttered the display. Ground clutter made low-altitude intercepts difficult. The radar required constant maintenance. Vacuum tubes failed regularly. The rotating antenna mechanism needed adjustment after every flight. But when the radar worked, it transformed night fighting from desperate searching to methodical hunting. The aircraft itself was remarkable for its time. Northrop Aircraft Corporation designed a night fighter that could accomplish something no previous American aircraft had achieved: finding and destroying enemy aircraft in complete darkness without ground assistance. The design featured twin Pratt and Whitney R. 2800 engines, each producing 2,000 horsepower. The twin-boom configuration provided stability and allowed the crew to operate effectively during long patrols. The P-61's armament reflected its role as a dedicated night hunter. Four 20mm Hispano M2 cannons mounted in the belly provided devastating firepower. Each gun fired 650 rounds per minute. A 2-second burst sent approximately 86 shells toward the target. High explosive incendiary ammunition could destroy aircraft in single bursts. Early P-61s also featured a remote-controlled dorsal turret with 4.50 caliber machine guns, though many units removed this due to weight concerns and buffeting issues that affected handling. The crew accommodations reflected the long missions these aircraft flew. The cockpit was spacious compared to single-seat fighters. The pilot had good visibility through a large canopy. The radar operator station included space for navigation charts and monitoring equipment. The aircraft was not pressurized, making high-altitude patrols uncomfortable in the cold European winter, but it could maintain patrol for 4 hours without refueling. By December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge had created unprecedented opportunities for night fighter crews. German forces were moving supplies and reinforcements under cover of darkness, believing they were safe from Allied air attack. They were wrong. The 422nd Night Fighter Squadron flew day and night interdiction missions against German supply lines. When weather grounded most Allied aircraft, the P-61s continued flying, using their radar to navigate and find targets. On December 26, 1944, First Lieutenant Paul A. Smith and First Lieutenant Robert E. Tierney achieved their 5th victory, making them the first American night fighter aces of World War II. The 422nd would produce more aces than any other P-61 unit during the war. Pilot Herman Ernst and radar operator Edward Kopsel would finish the war with 6 victories, including 1 V-1 flying bomb. Pilot Eugene Axtell also achieved ace status flying with the 422nd. Night fighting required different skills than daylight combat. Daylight fighter pilots relied on visual maneuvering, positioning their aircraft for gun solutions through aerobatic skill. Night fighters relied on instruments, radar, and patience. The kill happened before the enemy knew he was being hunted. There was no dogfighting, no aerobatic combat, just methodical stalking in darkness, followed by a brief, violent conclusion. The Black Widow served in the Pacific as well as Europe, facing different challenges in each theater. Squadrons deployed to New Guinea, the Philippines, and eventually Okinawa. In the Pacific, Japanese aircraft often flew at low altitudes, where ground clutter interfered with radar. Japanese pilots used different tactics than Germans, making intercepts more challenging. But the Black Widow proved just as lethal in Pacific darkness as it had over Europe. The top-scoring American night fighter ace came from the Pacific Theater. Major Carroll C. Smith, no relation to Paul A. Smith, flew with the 418th Night Fighter Squadron. On the night of December 29, 1944, Smith and his radar operator, Lieutenant Philip Porter, intercepted and destroyed 4 Japanese aircraft in a single night while flying their P-61 named Time's a-Wastin' off the coast of Mindoro in the Philippines. Those 4 victories brought Smith's total to 7, making him the highest-scoring American night fighter ace of World War II. Smith described the engagement in later reports. About an hour after dusk, ground controllers vectored him toward an aircraft approaching from the southwest at 8,000 feet. The crew set an intercept course and chased the target, a Japanese Irving twin-engine fighter, for 7 minutes through clouds. Finally getting a clear shot, Smith fired 2 bursts from 800 feet, and the Irving burst into flames. Minutes later, another Irving approached, and Smith destroyed it with a 20mm burst from 800 feet. The crew returned to patrol and intercepted 2 more aircraft that night, destroying both. 4 kills in one night, a feat unmatched by any other American night fighter crew. The 418th Night Fighter Squadron produced the only U.S. Army Air Force night fighter aces in the Pacific, a pilot radar operator team achievement that emphasized the collaborative nature of night fighting. Success depended on both crew members working as a single unit, the pilot handling the aircraft and firing the weapons, the radar operator finding targets and guiding intercepts. The psychological impact of night fighters was significant. Japanese and German pilots who had felt safe operating at night suddenly faced invisible hunters that appeared without warning. Mission success rates dropped as pilots became more cautious. Many crews refused to fly at night unless absolutely necessary. Those who did fly spent more time watching for threats than completing their missions. The Black Widow's greatest contribution was forcing the enemy to abandon night operations in many areas. By late 1944, German night bombing of Allied positions had effectively ceased in France. Japanese night harassment missions over American air bases declined dramatically in the Philippines. The enemy still controlled daylight in many areas early in the war, but darkness increasingly belonged to the Americans. The most remarkable aspect of the P-61's success was that it achieved this dominance with relatively few aircraft. The Army Air Force never had more than 150 P-61s operational simultaneously in all theaters. By the time World War II ended, the Army Air Forces had formed 14 Black Widow squadrons, 2 in the European theater, 8 in the Pacific theater, 2 in the China-Burma-India theater, and 2 in the Mediterranean theater. That small force fundamentally changed night warfare, proving that technology and training could overcome numerical disadvantages. Production of the Black Widow continued throughout 1944 and into 1945. Northrop built 706 P-61s total at their Hawthorne, California plant, with 674 delivered during the war and 32 after. The aircraft went through several variants: the P-61A with limited range and early radar, the P-61B with increased fuel capacity, and the improved SCR-720C radar, and the P-61C with turbocharged engines for better high-altitude performance. Each improvement made the aircraft more capable, but the basic design remained unchanged. The P-61 saw its first combat on June 30, 1944, when a Black Widow of the 6th Night Fighter Squadron shot down a Japanese Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bomber in the Central Pacific. Over the following year, P-61 crews would destroy 127 enemy aircraft and 18 V-1 flying bombs. While not a massive number compared to daylight fighters, these kills came under conditions where finding any target at all was a remarkable achievement. One of the last combat engagements involving a P-61 occurred on the night of August 14th to 15th, 1945, after Japan had agreed to surrender but before all forces had received word. A P-61B, named Lady in the Dark, from the 548th Night Fighter Squadron, piloted by Lieutenant Lee Kendall and radar operator Lieutenant John Shearer, encountered a Japanese Nakajima Ki 44 Tojo fighter. After the Japanese pilot sighted the P-61, he descended to wave-top level and began evasive maneuvers. These ended with his aircraft striking the water and exploding. Kendall and Shearer were never officially credited with this kill, as it occurred nearly 24 hours after the cessation of hostilities, but they were recognized with the Distinguished Flying Cross. After the war, the P-61 continued flying in various roles. Some were converted to weather reconnaissance aircraft, redesignated F-15 reporters, a designation that has no relation to the modern F-15 Eagle fighter. Others served with Air National Guard units until the early 1950s. A few were sold to foreign air forces. The last operational P-61 was retired in 1954. Nearly a decade after the war ended, its service extended because the Air Force struggled to develop an effective jet-powered night fighter replacement. The 422nd Night Fighter Squadron ended the war as the most successful P-61 unit, with 43 aerial victories plus 5 V-1 flying bombs and hundreds of ground targets destroyed. Under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Oris B. Johnson, the squadron proved that the Black Widow could dominate night skies over Europe. The unit's success came during the Battle of the Bulge, when bad weather grounded most aircraft. But night fighters continued operating, interdicting German supply lines and shooting down enemy aircraft. Paul A. Smith and Robert E. Tierney, the first American night fighter aces, completed their tours and returned home. Their achievement on December 26, 1944, marked a turning point in night fighter operations, proving that dedicated crews in specialized aircraft could achieve consistent success in conditions that had previously made aerial combat nearly impossible. Hermann Ernst and Edward Kopsel continued flying after becoming aces. On the night of March 2, 1945, they executed what became known as a triple play, destroying 3 enemy aircraft in a single night. They shot down 2 Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers and damaged a Messerschmitt Bf-110, bringing their total to 6 confirmed victories and solidifying their place among the war's most successful night fighter teams. The P-61 proved that night fighting required specialized aircraft, dedicated crews, and tactics developed through experience rather than theory. The Black Widow was not the fastest or most maneuverable fighter of World War II, but in darkness, it was among the most lethal. It transformed night operations from defensive patrol into offensive hunting, forcing the enemy to abandon the protection darkness had provided for centuries of warfare. Military historians note that the P-61's contribution went beyond its kill ratio. The aircraft's presence forced enemy forces to operate differently, degraded their effectiveness, and created psychological stress that affected morale. German and Japanese air crews knew that American night fighters were hunting them, even when they weren't detected. That knowledge changed behavior, reduced mission success rates, and ultimately contributed to Allied air superiority. The men who flew Black Widows rarely received the recognition given to daylight fighter pilots. Their missions were flown in darkness, unseen by anyone except their enemies. Their kills were not witnessed by large formations. Most Americans never knew night fighters existed until after the war, but those crews knew what they had accomplished. They had taken darkness away from the enemy and made it an American weapon. The P-61 demonstrated that technology could extend warfare into domains previously considered impractical. Before radar, night fighting was nearly impossible. Pilots might spend hours searching and never find an enemy aircraft, despite being miles away. The Black Widow changed that, proving that with proper equipment and training, darkness could be conquered. The legacy of the P-61 extended beyond World War II. It pioneered the concept of the all-weather interceptor, an aircraft that could operate effectively regardless of visibility or time of day. This concept would evolve into the sophisticated all-weather fighters that patrol today's skies, tracing their lineage back to the Black Widow and the crews who proved night fighting was not only possible but could be decisive. In 1944 and 1945, when darkness fell over Europe and the Pacific, American night fighters owned the skies. The P-61 Black Widow, flown by dedicated crews like Paul Smith and Robert Tierney, Hermann Ernst and Edward Kopsel, Carroll Smith and Philip Porter, proved that technology, training, and courage could overcome nature's oldest tactical concealment. They hunted in darkness with scientific precision, turning the night into an American advantage rather than an enemy shield. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. It helps more people discover these important pieces of history. Subscribe to stay connected with stories of the aircraft and crews that shaped the Second World War, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering those who served.